Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by David Lester of Olipop. David, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so I'd like to start out with your upbringing. Where did you grow up, and what would you say your childhood was like?
I grew up in the northwest of England, just outside Liverpool. Um, yeah, it was, if you've ever visited England, you'll know that there's kind of London and then there's everything else. So,
Yeah.
um, it's where I grew up. My friends' parents and my parents were doing jobs like kind of teachers and nurses and firemen and things like that. So, yeah, my dad worked for the local council as a kind of government job, managing parks and open spaces. My mum was a school teacher, became a principal. So yeah, that was interesting because a lot of the lessons that I learned in leadership came from stories my mum would bring home from school and the way
Mm,
that she managed that school. So,
yeah.
creating an environment, a community. When she was principal, you didn't get sent to the principal's office if you were naughty. It was a place of refuge. She was dealing with a lot of kids came from difficult backgrounds. So,
Mm,
there was a sofa that you could go and sleep if you were tired. There was books, there were games. She would have the kids present flowers to the ladies that did the lunches at the end of each school year.
mm,
So, I from there I uh started a corporate career after college with Diageo, the spirits company, which was super interesting, and nobody in my family had ever done anything like that before.
yeah.
So it was kind of fun, and it was a great company. It was also a little weird at times because of the
Mm,
way that people spoke to one another in that corporate environment. It didn't
mm,
feel sort of genuine to me, or like there was a bit of awesome people, but the language at times, that kind of corporate language that we all know, that
yeah.
those of us that have worked in corporate environments. So um it's interesting as Ben and I started to work together. Ben, my co-founder, he never worked in corporate environment before, like entrepreneur through and through. And so
Mm,
that's really kind of reflected into what I would say is the humanistic environment that we built, or certainly tried to build at Olipop.
incredible. I'd love to get into more of that relationship between you two as well, but going back to your own kind of education, I saw you went to Nottingham. What did you end up studying
Hmm.
there, and then why?
Um, I'd like to say there was a lot of thought went into it. I don't think there was. I always surprised me, coming to the States at that age or interacting with Americans at that age. They always seemed much more burned up than I was in terms of
Mm,
what they wanted to do with their lives, and like, they were doing internships, and I think the work experience I had up to that point, I worked summer kind of collecting trash, like, it was a very difficult job up early in the morning, and
yeah.
doing the rounds and things. So I studied management studies with Spanish. I knew I loved language. I
Mm,
I loved kind of travel. And management was sort of like the undergrad sort of generic MBA type. We studied a bunch of stuff that I made no sense to me at the time, like organizational behavioral theory. Like, I'd never
mm.
been part of an organization before, so I had no context for evaluating theory, micro and macroeconomics. With hindsight, it was reasonably interesting and helpful. And as part of that, in the UK, if you study language, you do 2 years and then you go abroad and then you come back. So that year abroad was very interesting for me. I went and studied at Monterrey University in Mexico, incredible university in the north of Mexico. That was an amazing experience. The first time I'd really been outside of Europe
Yeah.
properly. Then I went and worked in Brazil, teaching English in the favelas and the shanty towns in Rio de Janeiro for 3 months.
Mm.
Um, and this was kind of aging myself now, but before, sort of, there was no smartphones or anything.
Yeah.
Internet was about there. You could like messenger and things back in those days, but
Yeah.
so it was a real adventure. And then I rounded out the year working for a company, an import company in Valencia in Spain. So
Wow.
that was super interesting. And yeah, but not a lot of thought. And certainly in the UK, I think this is still the case.
Hmm.
It Your degree course doesn't necessarily lead into your career choice. So like,
Yeah.
there's plenty of people in my line of work that were, did English majors or history, or it was basically just prove you can get a, turn up for class and, are intelligent enough to complete these assignments to a certain degree of competence. And then
Yeah.
we'll give you a job and we'll start teaching you the useful information that you need to know. And so that's
Yeah.
essentially what I did. MBA is not as common in the UK, was common at the time. I think it's still the case to do a graduate scheme. So you essentially
Mm.
apply to, a large company, and they take you into this scheme and sort of teach you the skills that you need. So
Yeah.
I applied to a number of places, including Diageo. Looking back now, it's one of those life moments where that's a real sliding doors. Like there was,
Yeah.
I think, over 8,000 applications, and they picked two of us to go
Wow.
onto that grad scheme. And so at that point, it's not entirely down to competence that you're getting picked out of that lineup, right? Like you do that process another 100 times and you don't get picked, basically.
Yeah.
So it was very transformational for me. As I say, an amazing company taught me how to do marketing. Basically, they had a course at the time, Diageo way of brand building. It was actually something that they marketed to the city, to investors, as a competitive advantage for the company.
Mm.
And so I was sent on a couple of kind of week-long courses taught by senior members of the global marketing team
Okay.
on the theory of marketing, and it was unbelievable, really, and it sort of set the tone for my career.
Wow. So just out of curiosity, how long did you end up working there before you went on to your next venture? I did see you did get into beverages prior to Olipop as well. So how long were you in this role?
Yeah, I worked at Diageo for 10 years. So I did
Mm.
4 years in London, and then I was this is kind of indicative of my life choices, I think. These sort of somewhat naive, whimsical, sort of just seeking adventure. But I'd done 4 years there. I really enjoyed it. A lot of my friends were living in London, but I was like, I'm not living my whole life in London. This is not how this is going to play out. So I said to Diageo, like, give me somewhere else to go that I can go and work. They were like, what about Spain? Like, no, that's a bit too close. I've been there a bunch of times. And they said, what about Australia? There's a
Wow.
job there. And I was like, okay. So I went to Australia and lived in Australia in Sydney for 4 years, which was an awesome experience. And
Wow.
then I was like, okay, what's next? So at the time, one of my bosses actually had become the innovation director for Diageo in Latin America,
Mm.
and needed somebody to come in and develop a pipeline of products for emerging middle class consumers across Latin America. It was a
Okay.
time when kind of, when was this, like 2010 or so, when the brick economies were a real thing, and
Mm.
Diageo divested a lot of its cheaper portfolio of products, and so you now had this huge buying power amongst middle class consumers, emerging middle class,
Mhm.
um, but were individually unable to afford like a bottle of Johnny Walker Black or a bottle of Ciroc. So,
Yeah.
the remit was to develop, a pipeline of products for that consumer within Latin America, which, so I went and worked in Sao Paulo for a couple of years doing that. And at that point, I was like, this is the best job I could possibly have within this company. It was like so fun, and living in Sao Paulo. And I
Yeah.
was like, I don't think I'm going to eclipse this. And I also had become a little grumpy with corporate bureaucracy. Like I had a
Mm.
bad attitude at the time. And I remember having a sort of talk with myself and saying, look, you either need to improve your attitude, or if you think you're so smart, like go and do it yourself.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of combination of things. I was also losing a little bit of motivation in what I was doing. I remember sitting in a meeting room in Colombia talking about kind of tripling the size of whiskey in Latin America over the next 5 years, and realizing I just didn't care about that outcome. And,
Mm.
I remember with my mom, like, you know, kids would go back 10 years after they left the school to visit her because of the impact she'd had on their lives.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is fun, but I don't think I want to do this for another 10 years.
Yeah.
So I basically just I was engaged at the time. My now wife is American, so she'd very gamely come down to Sao Paulo to Brazil with me, and
Mm.
was ready to move back to the States. And so I said to my boss at the time, I was like, look, I think I'm done. I'm gonna quit. And she was like, well, don't quit. Go to San Francisco, which is where I decided to go to, because it's again very naive decision. I'm just like, it's kind of, I've never been there before.
Yeah.
It's like seems like an entrepreneurial place. The weather's good. It's like kind of outdoorsy. Like this seems like a good place to go.
Yeah.
And yeah, so she said, look, don't quit, go on sabbatical. And then if you don't like it, you can come back and work in New York or whatever. And so after a couple of months, I spoke to her and I was like, look, I don't know what I'm going to do here yet, but I'm not going to come back. So,
Mm.
and she said to me, look, if your mind's made up, you might want to speak to this guy. He's looking for a business partner. And it was something that had come across her desk through her own network. And that turned out to be Ben,
Wow.
who's my co-founder now. We met at a coffee shop in Palo Alto. And he had like a little bag of sodas, and he's like a crazy guy that, the sort of guy that wakes up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, wondering what the meaning of life is, and then wakes up with that level of intensity the next day.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting conversation, very different from, my experience at Diageo. He told me about probiotics and the gut microbiome and, this like mission that he had. And I was like, oh my God, yes. Okay, fine. I'm in. And so I worked, a year, no salary to kind of help get that off the ground. We had nothing. We had no funding or investment or anything at that stage. Again, massively naive looking back, and it was a very stressful experience.
Yeah.
That first venture, Obi, was where we cut our teeth as entrepreneurs. We learned about our industry. Those things I knew, kind of developing products and launching products. I had some experience in fundraising. I had zero experience in.
Oh, yep.
So, yeah, it was just sort of learn by doing and trial and error, really. So, yeah, that was our kind of routine.
Interesting. So to the listeners out there, or to make it clear to the listeners, this is pre-Olipop. This is Obi, you said, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So Ben and I have been working together for over 10 years now. The first venture was very similar to Olipop. It was a healthy soda, but it had a water kefir base.
Mm.
It was probiotic. It was in a bottle, a glass bottle. Yeah. So that was version kind of 1.0, and that was our first. And now it's very unsurprising to me why you see a lot of entrepreneurial stories that go, it's venture 2 or 3 that really
Yep.
pops, because you kind of need to fail at some stuff first, I think.
Yep, for sure. I'm curious then, what led to then leading from Obi to getting into then Olipop, this kind of like functional soda in a can? You went from a bottle. What kind of differentiated that for you guys to start this next venture then?
Yeah, I mean, after Obi, I say it was a very challenging experience that, and I needed some time just to rest for a period after it,
Yeah.
do some self-reflection. I think I had a lot of personal growth to do as well, which is helpful as an entrepreneur. And but Ben and I felt like we were onto something. We had tasted success with the product. We'd seen it sell pretty well. We'd learned some aspects of optimization, like the fermentation wasn't brilliant for scaling.
Mm.
Glass the glass bottle, excuse me, was kind of problematic to a degree as well. So, and we were also connected to some of the leading researchers, microbiologists, in the in the space by that time. And the research was really changing. It was changing from a focus on probiotics to a focus on prebiotics. And I remember hearing from a guy, Justin Sonnenberg out of Stanford, who'd studied hunter-gatherer tribes. And really what he's saying is like, look, instead of like putting foreign bacteria, probiotics into your body is of sort of limited value potentially. What we really need to be doing is feeding the bacteria that are already there, feeding the probiotics
Mm.
already in our gut. And if you look at studies of hunter-gatherer tribes, there's huge. There's two main differences between what we're consuming today and what hunter-gatherer tribes are consuming. And I actually finally got around to reading the Sapiens book recently, and you see it's like you
Yeah.
got these hundreds of thousands of years of hunter-gatherer, then you got like 100 years of agriculture and farming, 100 years of industrialization, and
Hmm.
that's it. So our physiology still largely based off hunter-gatherer lifestyle and diet.
Yep.
And hunter-gatherers consume like were consumed. Some tribes still exist today in parts of Asia and Africa, and helpful, I think, to study as well. But 200 grams of fiber in a day or so versus our 15 on average in
Mm.
the West now,
Yep.
and over 2,000, 1,500, 2,000 different types of food in a year, because you're foraging versus our 200 if we're lucky. Like processed food is made from 4 ingredients in the main,
Yeah.
so with a bunch of flavoring attached. So the impact of that is we've massively reduced the complexity and diversity of our gut microbiome
Mm.
versus what it used to look like. And so a lot of modern illness and disease can really be traced back to issues with the gut, immune
Yep.
response, um, and inflammation, those types of things. So, Sonnenberg's analogy was like, if you're taking probiotics without addressing underlying digestive health, it's akin to throwing seeds into a desert and hoping you're going to grow a garden. It's just,
Mm.
not going to happen. So you need to address the underlying soil health
Yeah.
before you start thinking about anything else. And so that was really, Ben's inspiration for the formulation for Olipop. And he spent a lot, I think, went to Japan for a while,
Mm.
and then came back and was really looking at what combination of ingredients is going to be most beneficial for the gut. And so
Yeah.
this is the Ollie Smart blend that we've now done studies with Baylor and Purdue medical colleges around. We take this stuff very, very seriously. Like the types of studies we've done, and not even large companies not doing this level of research around their products and formulation.
Yep.
And so you end up with a product that has nutrient diversity, 8 different plant-based ingredients. It has 9 grams of fiber, a portion of which is prebiotic fiber. And so you're essentially, soda is the biggest additional like additive to the global diet
Yep.
of sugar. So you're essentially taking something which is the biggest problem to the modern diet and kind of
Mhm.
flipping it. So we have a low sugar product with high nutrient diversity and fiber.
I love it. So with such a functional product, especially in beverages, I'm curious, how did you guys in early days, and especially now as well, approach flavor? I mean, you're going to convince the consumers on a functional drink, trying to switch from their conventional soda, but flavor plays a huge role in that convincing. So how do you guys approach like new flavors? What were those first flavors at launch and why?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think what's interesting, I mean, Ben is a very smart guy and super, he thinks very deeply about things and thinks very structurally about things. So
Yeah.
he grew up eating standard American diet. He was overweight when he was younger. He was eating junk food and sort of had made a switch. And, he kind of talks about it a little bit on podcasts and stuff that he's done. But so he's like, I get it. This stuff is delicious. Like, soda tastes really good, like chocolate bars. I know we were talking once about like Cadbury's cream eggs, how much we love them.
Yep.
Like this stuff it tastes great and it's got amazing memories attached to it as well, like quite nostalgic. So I think he just felt that like the health food industry was too niche and a little bit uh the word like condescending at times,
Mm.
and he wanted to formulate products that everybody could enjoy. And it's like, why does soda need to be so bad? It or questioning that. What if I could make one that was good for you?
Mm.
So, then you just start to look at the main soda flavors. So we started with cola was one, strawberry vanilla. It's kind of like a cream soda, strawberry cream soda,
Yep.
and the ginger lemon was less of a soda play and more of, because we're in the kombucha set. We're
Yeah.
like, we should have one that's a bit more of a kombucha profile. That actually has turned out to be our lowest selling SKU.
Interesting.
So, we just kind of built soda flavors on top of it. And, I remember launching one of our early launch retailers with Erewhon in LA.
Yep.
So for people that don't know, don't live in LA, Erewhon is kind of like the, Uber health retailers where a lot of celebs go to do their health shopping and stuff. So
Hmm.
I was somewhat skeptical of how our product would perform in that store because,
Yeah.
we don't have like a bunch of benefits smattered all over the can. It's like, it tastes sweet. And Olipop strawberry vanilla, I think is still the case, is the top selling beverage SKU within everyone outside of water.
Wow.
So I actually don't drink strawberry vanilla that often myself because I find it too sweet for
Yeah.
my palate. But so it's fascinating. You see, like everybody loves soda,
Yeah.
and they don't have a problem with root beer. They have a problem where there's 45 grams of sugar and
Mm,
high acidity and other ingredients and stuff that are in those products. So
for sure.
that's, I think, has been, when you solve, we found that we're really solving for a major consumer need or want, which is people love soda and
Yeah.
the memories that come with it and real connection to it. And if you actually flip that on its head and not just make it neutral, but actually, health positive, that then becomes very interesting.
For sure. So for personally, my favorite's lemon lime. I think that's a great
Mm,
alternative to like the traditional Sprite or anything like that to the
yep.
listeners out there. It's great. Um, but then you guys also have an amazing approach at your marketing strategy, such as like partnerships. And I know the banana cream you partnered with the Minions, for example. I would love to
Hmm.
hear kind of your approach on marketing, especially partnerships. How did those come to life? And kind of talk maybe on the Minions one, if you could.
Yeah, it's a lot less. So I think there's marketing is complicated, right? So I think
Mhm.
there's lots of different ways you can look at it, and it depends on your growth stage and stuff as well. So initially, what we did was just refine the concept.
Yeah.
And so one of the things some of the brands that I looked at early on were brands like Halo Top, Beyond Meat, Seedlip in non-alc spirits.
Mm,
These were brands that really understood the categories that they were playing in. So if you take kind of Halo Top as an example, not the first low calorie ice cream,
yeah.
but probably the first one to understand that ice cream is about indulgence. And
Yeah.
so if you don't do indulgence, it doesn't matter if you got 3 calories or 3,000 calories, no one's going to eat that product. So
Yeah.
they did gold packaging, indulgent flavors. They even told you to eat to the bottom of the tub, which
Yeah.
Ben and Jerry's doesn't do. So it was like indulgence on steroids, essentially.
Yeah.
And Seedlip understood that alcohol is about special occasions. So where a lot of non-alc brands had fallen down is their packaging just didn't look great. Like didn't look as premium, it didn't look as special. And
Yeah.
Seedlip launched in the top 50 bars globally. Their packaging is beautiful, their photography is amazing,
Yeah.
cocktail recipes are like top drawer, right? Um, so my mantra from the outset was we got to behave like a soda.
Mm,
Soda's about refreshment, it's about fun. So I actually banned our marketing team from talking about functional benefit because investors would ask us initially, they'd be like, "Well, how are you going to educate people on like prebiotics?" And I would probably guess that now, like at least 80% of our consumer base does not know what a prebiotic is,
yeah.
and probably only under 5% would actually be able to accurately describe what it does in the body.
Yeah.
Um, Majority of consumers don't care that much. They, you know, when you look at products like Oreos and Lucky Charms and Coke, people are not buying these because of their founder's story or a farm they were grown on or a
Mhm.
particular ingredient that they have. It's because of the way those products make people feel.
For sure.
So that's what marketing has to be about fundamentally. So initially, we didn't heavily invested in marketing. We just got the concept right. We were clear with consumers what this is, which
Yeah.
is like, this is a soda. And so semiotically, we behaved like a soda. Um, and then more recently, we wanted to build an emotional brand platform over the top of that. And
Mm.
so we actually worked with a brand strategy consultancy called Squint, who it's like a process of about a year worth of research. As we looked at soda, we looked at the category that we built, and decided how we wanted to position ourselves emotionally within this space,
Mm.
and really go toe to toe with the likes of Coke and Pepsi. And so, that's where the real love territory came from, and precipitated in our first ad that we did with Camila Cabello,
Mm.
which has been performing exceptionally well. We kind of did that in house,
Yeah.
so the rest of the stuff, the partnerships and things, we have an amazing team, and particular guy in the team, Stephen Vigilante, is unique kind of startup character. You find these people, probably count myself in this at this point, like that would not survive, you know, 2 weeks within a corporate organization.
Yeah.
And they have the curious, they're very comfortable with ambiguity and disruption and change, and they're kind
Yeah.
of restless, and probably have a bunch of like weak points in certain things, and then
For sure.
really spike in other areas. Like you find a lot of entrepreneurs, say like myself, that are quite similar.
For sure.
um and so yeah, Stephen is, he's just opened some incredible doors just through his own curiosity.
Yeah.
But I do love the John Hegarty quote from BBH: "Do interesting things, and interesting things will happen to you." So,
Mm.
take Minions for example. That was just a cold outreach on LinkedIn. Universal just reached out
Wow.
to us and were like, "Hey, we love what you're doing, and would you want to partner?" And we were like, "Yes, but you realize we're a pretty small company." And they were like, "Look, we just love your brand, and we think this would be super cool." And so then, of course, we were like, "Well, we're not going to do this by a half measure. Let's go all in." And so, this is where the banana cream came from, because Minions love banana. And
Yep.
I was chatting to Ben about it, and he was like, "I was actually just thinking about banana soda, because I was thinking that would be the most difficult formulation to develop."
Yep.
And so we initially, the idea was, we'll do it as a joke, and like, it'll probably taste disgusting, but that'll be part of the sort of, Marmite approach. It'll be like a love
Yeah.
it or hate it type thing. Um, Ben is a very skilled formulator, and it actually ended up tasting amazing to the point
Wow.
that we brought it back as a permanent SKU afterwards. So yeah, I think do interesting things is a
Yeah.
good, as you get into it.
For sure.
But initially, for brands under 50 million in revenue, you should be focused on your concept. And marketing can be a bit of a distraction, and an
Mhm.
expensive one at that.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to hear. So you guys sell direct to consumer. You're also rolled out in retail as well. Percentage wise, what would you say is direct to consumer on your site, and also in comparison to retail? How are you guys selling now?
The direct consumer business is under 20% at this point.
Yeah.
Um, it At one stage in our business, it was like 50%, because
Mm.
we launched just before COVID. So that's kind of a bit of a problem for a beverage brand, because traditionally what you would do is you'd go into store and you'd sample people, and then, because they'd never tried your product before,
Yeah.
and we couldn't sample anybody. Like, interestingly,
Mm.
we've never done sampling for this product before,
Wow.
at any kind of scale. So um, we pivoted all of that budget into D2C. And to give Stephen props again, he was the guy that came. He actually came to me a month or two before COVID hit. It
Mm.
wasn't really even on the radar at that point. It was like, "Hey, I really think we should be, doing more with D2C. Like, can I take a look at it?" And in my mind, I was like, I don't know, heavy. It doesn't feel like a right a great channel for us. But I was like, sure, whatever, go and take a look at it.
Yeah.
And he started to figure it out just in the nick of time, and COVID hit. And so we were like,
Mm,
okay, now we're
yeah.
really going to go after it. And, cost of inventory on ad inventory was low at the time. And, the CAC rates were insane. So
Yeah.
it's almost like any CPG business that did not build a D2C platform during COVID really missed out, because
Yeah.
I don't
For
think you
sure.
get that opportunity again. Like trying to do now what we did then would be like very, very expensive.
For sure.
And it just, it was an opportunity that was there, and we took advantage of it.
Absolutely. Well, I like to conclude each episode with this. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret along the way, what would you say that would be?
Um, I still find a lot of the time vulnerability, humility is like the biggest areas of learning for me still now,
Mm,
so those are the things I think that lead you to a growth mindset, and the sort of adaptability that you need to be an entrepreneur, because there is no book you can read on it. There's, what we're doing now, nobody's really done before. So
yeah.
there's people I can chat to get advice, but you kind of have to, if you're doing something truly transformational, you're kind of going to be on your own. So the
Yeah.
skills you need to learn in are ones of adaptation and personal growth. And you have to, that's I think Ben said this to me at the beginning of our time together, that entrepreneurship for him had been as much a personal journey as it had a professional one.
Mm,
And that's what I find really interesting about it, is being challenged and learning about yourself. So those are the important things. The societal success metrics are sort of
yep.
kind of random. Like there's nothing to dictate that Olipop would have been this successful or not. I think again, you could have run this movie another 3 times and it maybe didn't work out as well as this.
Yeah.
But what you do have control over is the process, and are you enjoying it, and make sure you've got boundaries around what
Yep.
you're doing. So you're making the entrepreneur experience work for you,
For
rather
sure.
than burn you out. And then everything else is like kind of, up for grabs. It doesn't, people now sort of say to me at this point, oh my God, it's so impressive what you guys are doing. And nobody was saying that to me 4 years ago. But
Yeah.
I actually think it was more impressive what we were doing, because Ben and I had to get back on our feet after a failed venture. We had to raise capital off a PowerPoint deck. We had to build a
Mm,
team from nothing. We had to get in a store with no distributor. Like those were
yeah.
impressive things. So when I speak to entrepreneurs that are maybe a little less far down the path, I'm like, look, you're doing it right now. Society won't be telling you. I
Yeah.
don't know. You might not be getting invited on a podcast to talk about it, whatever. But it's impressive what you're doing. So hold your own value in
Mm,
that. And so once you have that kind of side, that also helps get your ego in check too. So
for sure.
at this point, I understand that a lot of our success, some of it's built on chance, some of it is like the team that we've built. It's not necessarily what I'm doing per se.
Yep.
So it just kind of keeps things in perspective.
Absolutely. Well, David, thank you so much for joining me today. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Olipop at drinkolipop.com.